Hello and welcome. I am Gohar Raza and you are watching Eureka. In 19th century, a very large migration of people took place from India to southern part of Africa. This indentured labor was taken to South Africa for growing sugar canes. They faced a lot of hardship. The oppressive imperialism crushed them there. But the spirit of the Indians who had migrated could never be crushed. South Africa is a country where Gandhi started his political career, which intensely influenced not only South Africa, but India and the world at large. The Indian population which settled there at least knew one thing, that without education you cannot survive. And that spirit continued for generations, inspired both parents and young ones. They gained excellence. And today we have a very special guest from South Africa. Welcome, Dr. Diresh, Professor Diresh, to Rajya Sabha and India. I'm very happy and honored that you have accepted our invitation to come and appear at Eureka. Let's begin from the beginning. You were a child who was born during apartheid era, when the blacks, the Indians, the colored population was discriminated against. How do you recollect those periods?
Okay. First of all, Goa, thank you very much for inviting me to be on your show. It was an absolute pleasure to meet you when you were down in South Africa, and I absolutely love coming to India once again. But anyway, we can get back to your question. You know, during the height of apartheid, which was around the 1970s, 1980s, I mean, that is the era in which I was a child. And as a child, you don't really realize that you are in an apartheid state because everything is segregated. So, for example,
you were not allowed to go to beaches which were reserved for whites.
So
you were not allowed to sit on table and chair which was reserved for, or restaurant, or school, or college.
Yeah, so it's simple. You know, you don't realize it because you're in a sheltered environment. You kind of in a community of just Indians. And then you wonder, when you go out of that community, why you see signs like whites only. Or if you go to a restaurant, you're not allowed to sit in a particular area of the restaurant. Or if you go to a beach, certain parts of the beach are only for whites. You know, so you don't realize that. But I'll tell you what.
Or residential areas.
Or residential areas. But it was so brainwashed into the black population of South Africa that you were below everyone else, that you just took it for granted.
That you were subhuman.
That you were subhuman. That
whites were humans and everybody else was subhuman.
Yes, and from a very early age, as a result, you kind of say, oh, but you know, there must be something special about them. And so I'm not at the same level. So I can't perform at the same level. I can't think at that level. And that was the kind of brainwashing that took place in the country. And it took place, I have to say, it was sad to say this, but it took place, you know, from the communities themselves. The communities themselves were so brainwashed by the apartheid state, they started to teach that to their children.
Your father was a teacher and your mother was a homemaker.
Yeah.
But mother was after always your life to get educated and do well in this school.
I think
so you give all the credit to your mother.
I think it's something that you find in most Indian families or families of Indian origin. The emphasis placed on education is extremely high. And I think a lot of the times it's really the mother, which is the soul of the household, the real heart of the household, that kind of pushes this whole agenda for education. It was the same with me. So my mother yelled at me, shouted at me, ensured that that you get the education. And I have to say, as a young kid, I was in no way inclined towards education.
Did you hate your this scolding as a child?
Oh yeah,
all the
oh
time?
yeah, oh yeah. I mean, I was
You
scolded all
were
the time.
interested in play and game. And
So I was a keen sports person when I was young. I played a lot of cricket. And so growing up, I mean, if I could help it, I'll spend the entire day out playing cricket or any other sport. And obviously my mother won't have that. She wanted to ensure that I had a good education. And so it was always the kind of yelling and saying, you know, you would amount to nothing if you don't go and study. I think it's a typical thing. I think I just look at all the Indian families in South Africa and the community in South Africa. That's a common statement that you'd hear from any mother in the household. I kind of realized that maybe I got to do something. I got to put some effort into studying so that I can realize what I would like to have is basically a good life.
and then it was a departure from
Well, so
your grades improved.
Yeah.
You started doing well. Your teachers were very angry with you most of the time.
Yeah.
And they thought that you should be sent to a special school, etc. But then the teachers accepted you as a bright child.
Yeah. So I tell you what, it was literally like turning a light switch. So I mean, from about grade 1 to about grade 7, literally I was dead last in the division. I mean, that is how bad I was. But it's expected. I mean, if you do nothing, if you don't study, then you can't expect any results.
Yes.
And then I think towards the end of grade 7, grade 8, I started to apply myself. And so I started studying a little bit. And suddenly I went from dead last in the class to number 1, number 2 in the class. It's just a matter of spending a couple hours each day, just kind of revising and so forth. And then it struck me, there's something to this. I've got these abilities. Why am I not using it?
So then onwards, it was a departure, and you always used your abilities, which you were endowed with.
Yeah, but I tell you what, it's abilities, but it's also hard work. So I think all of us have got the ability. We've all been gifted with a brain. It's about using it and putting in the hours in terms of using it.
I have to take a short break. Don't go anywhere. We'll come back soon. Welcome back. You became a very good student from a very bad student. But your parents had nothing to do with science and science education.
No.
They didn't know probably about what is engineering all about. What inspired you to move towards engineering and hard work?
So, I mean, I'll tell you what, during the apartheid era in South Africa, if you were black, you didn't know anything about engineering, you didn't know anything about being a scientist. There were very few individuals.
You were deliberately kept away
That's it, yeah.
if your color of the skin
Yeah,
was not white.
that's it. And,
You were deliberately kept ignorant. That's what you are saying?
so there was a concerted effort to make sure that the black community was not highly educated. So you could, they would allow the black people to go do teaching or law or something along those lines, as long as it wasn't actually mainstream engineering and science. And, simple things like,
And why was that?
I think it was a concerted effort to make sure that the high-level science and engineering jobs were kept for whites. So that was it. I remember coming to India and in early 1980s, and I saw a pilot, and the pilot was Indian. And I was absolutely shocked. I said, this plane's going to crash. Because
Just because it was
Because
not
the mindset-
white color.
because the mindset was always that high-level jobs or high-level activities could only be done by
Steve
whites.
Biko has written
Yes.
that the most potent arsenal in the hands of oppressor is the mind
That's
of
it. Yeah.
the oppressed.
And it took a long time, I think, to realize that you were not a second-class citizen, that you had all the same abilities and capabilities to do whatever it is that anyone else could do in this world.
And some of the teachers, white teachers, helped you.
Well, this happened at university. So, at high school, I was privileged to go to a high school which has got a strong association with Mahatma Gandhi. So my school was called Gandhi Desai. It was regarded as the top Indian school in South Africa. So I had a very good education at high school level. But it was the same. It was all Indian teachers. And so the only exposure that I got to the white community was when I got to university. And I was privileged enough.
How did you land up in a white college? Because there was Emil Sultan
Yeah.
College there, instituted by an Indian, started by an Indian. How did white college accept you?
So we had a couple Indian universities. I mean, there was the Emil Sultan, there was the University of Durban Westville. And I kind of looked at the engineering programs when I got interested in engineering. And I kind of figured out that the best engineering program at the time was at the University of Natal. And so I applied.
Which was purely white.
Well, it was towards the end of apartheid. So this was 1990, when I was first year at university. Nelson Mandela had just been released. So the country was starting to open up. Obviously, you still had to get permission to go to the university.
Are you saying you were at the right place at the right time?
Yeah, I think luck has got a lot to do with it. There were obviously black people that went to University of Natal before me. They would have had to get special permission as well to go to the university. But the University of Natal at the time had the only black medical school in the country. And so you'd find a lot of the leaders of South Africa today are graduates of University of Natal. That's because they all went to medical school. But yeah, I was lucky. I was lucky to get into the University of Natal. As I said, the level of education was extremely high. My first year class was predominantly white. In fact, the university was predominantly the white. There were just a few black students on the campus.
Till 1999, when I first visited the University of Natal, it was almost purely white.
Yes, it was. But I tell you what, there's been major transformation in the last 10 years. If you had to come to one of our campuses today, it's almost 75–80% black. So there's been that transformation.
That should be,
Yep.
because more than 80% of the population is black population
Yes.
in the country. So any institution should represent that much percentage.
Yeah, and other institutions in South Africa at the moment, higher education institutions, are facing a struggle because they have not transformed to the level as which the University of KwaZulu-Natal has transformed. So you still find some universities which are
University of Stellenbosch stands out
and I think
very clearly as white university even now.
Yeah, and I've just come back. We've had a number of protest actions amongst university students on all our campuses around the country, and the pressing issue is transformation.
That is how transformation is taking place, and transformation is all about. But let's come back to your career. Why did you choose chemical engineering as your subject of interest?
So in high school, once I started getting good grades, I think if you got an Indian family, you would realize your mother wants you to be a medical doctor. So it was the same with me. My mother wanted me to be a medical doctor. And in grade 12 and grade 11, I had taken part in the National Science Olympiad. This was a science Olympiad open to the entire country across all race groups. And I was placed in the top 5 in the country in the National Science Olympiad. And as part of a prize for that, they actually allowed us to go to the universities in grade 12 and to look at all the different careers that are possible. And when I was going through the School of Engineering, that struck me as something that I would like to do. I had very good abilities in mathematics, in physical science. I liked solving problems. As a kid, one of my favorite programs on TV was MacGyver. Always kind of solving problems using science and technology. And so that kind of struck me as something I would really like to do. And chemical engineering struck me because everyone kept telling me this is the toughest of the engineering disciplines. And so it was a challenge.
Because it was tough.
Yeah.
That's why you took it up.
Yes, a challenge.
As a challenge.
Let's take the challenge.
And it's still a challenge for you.
Yes, it's still a challenge. It's still something that you want to solve problems. And how do you use your skills and your knowledge set in chemical engineering to solve problems?
When you look back at the educational institutions, a bright mind like you today probably has more opportunities as compared to when it was apartheid era. How do young people look at this change happening?
I think young people are starting to understand that they are an asset for the country. and they've got to apply themselves so that they can improve the lives of all the citizens of the country. And my message when I go out and I speak to high school kids is that the way that you can change it is through science, technology, engineering, and mathematics.
But is it cognitive dissonance, as it's called, creating a cognitive dissonance among the younger generations that this transformation has taken place? Certain things are lagging behind, certain institutions are lagging behind. How do they look at this whole change that's coming about, and at a very fast pace, in fact?
Yeah, so you know, we have some remnants of we have a large remnants of the apartheid still with us. So there's still a lot of schools, high schools and primary schools in the country which are not at the level at which they can have good science and mathematics facilities, no good science and mathematics teachers. And those are typically rural schools. You find in the urban areas the change is much faster than it is in the rural areas. And part of our mission is trying to transform not just the urban areas, but also the rural areas. You know, so at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, for example, we've got a science center. We regularly invite students from the rural areas into the science centers, give them talks. We've developed a number of science kits because a lot of these schools out in the rural areas don't have science laboratories. Science kits, we give it to the schools, and we train the high school teachers, for example.
I personally see a lot of hope
Yeah.
as well as enthusiasm to transform. I have to take a break. We'll come back soon. Don't go anywhere. Professor Dinesh, you chose chemical engineering as the subject where you wanted to excel, and you have excelled. You took up a large number of responsibilities within the institution. These responsibilities and your research, do they clash? Because you have been publishing almost 3 papers in the best of the journals around the world in a month. That's hell of a lot. How do you cope up with this? You are Pro Vice Chancellor, you are Director, you are Founder Director of so many labs, etc. How do you cope up?
So very early on in my career, Goha, I decided that one person cannot make a change. It's all about a team. And so I decided that I had to develop the next generation. And so all of my students, I put a lot of effort into training them and ensuring that they then train the ones that follow them. So the system that I have in my research team is that my postdocs at the moment and my researchers and my academics under my leadership are people that would have done masters with me, that would have done their PhDs with me, that have done their postdocs with me. And so that's how the team is actually built up. And they in turn would then teach to the ones below them. So for example, the PhD students would help train the master students. So this kind of pyramid scheme is really what I've got to thank.
I was very particularly impressed by the way that you have organized your laboratory that I visited, where you have a lab which generates, which constructs instruments for you to overcome the problem of specially import and delay in repairs.
Yeah.
When did you start conceiving of that, or it was an experiment that you started doing and it came along?
Well, I think it happened because as a young scientist, you don't have access to large amounts of research grants, and you want to do good research. So I decided if I can't get the grants, then how do I use my limited funding that I have and do good science? And that is where I decided that I got to invest now in actually building equipment. So if I need the equipment to do my research, I got to build it. And so that kind of mindset has helped us to develop what is now probably one of the top 2 or 3 laboratories in the world in the field of chemical thermodynamics. But it's this kind of perseverance with saying that I'm not just going to do the science, but I'm going to do whatever it takes, build the infrastructure to do the science as well.
This is exactly how Dr. S.S. Bhatnagar conceived CSIR in India. He started research in chemistry, then he thought that physics is extremely important, so he built a laboratory in physics, and a very elaborate workshop to support
Yeah.
the research. Your conception of a laboratory, it grew over a period of time, or it was right from the beginning just because you were pressed very hard to conserve on funds?
No, it grew with time. I mean, I always had the vision. I mean, I remember when I was being interviewed for the academic position, I was, I think, about 25, 26 years old at the time. And one of the questions they asked you was, so where do you see yourself in 10 years' time? You know, where do you want to be as a researcher, as an academic? And I was very frank. I said, I want to be a professor by my early 30s, which I was able to do at age 31, full professor. And I want to build one of the top laboratories in the world. So that was a vision I had. So you've got to have this vision before you can start with anything, because it kind of lays out the roadmap about how you get there.
And you have traveled this roadmap
Yes.
with determination and dedication.
Yeah, and you always persevere no matter what. But it's hard work. It's a
In
lot of
South
effort, yeah.
Africa, one of the greatest honors is to become a national professor and a researcher. When you got this honor in South Africa, which not many scientists have got, how did you feel?
No, I think it's humbling. First of all, I think it's humbling that
An Indian getting a South African of Indian
Yeah.
origin, forgive me
Yeah.
for slip of tongue, getting this honor was exceptional.
Yeah, I mean, there's not too many people that that get the honor of being on the academies of both science and engineering for South Africa. I was the youngest appointed professor in any discipline in Africa at the time. I think I was 31 years old. So, you know, you feel humbled, but at the same time, it kind of ratifies all the things that you kind of thought about. When I kind of thought about after hearing Nelson Mandela in 1990, that everyone has the ability to do anything. And I think you see that from most visionary leaders. They kind of inspire people, they motivate them, they kind of give them that perseverance to strive, to want to do their best.
So, from a naughty child to becoming a confident researcher whose work is recognized at national level, this whole journey has also been a journey, in my opinion, of a person who is ready to solve the national problems. Now, this rare earth material that you have been working on, how important is it and why it's important for South Africa?
So I think, you know, I think everyone realizes that South Africa is blessed with mineral wealth. We've got an exceptional number of high value metals, you know, that we have in the ground in the country. The problem is that we don't beneficiate it. We kind of mine it and we sell the ore, or we sell it slightly refined. Now, in order to add value, you've got to undertake beneficiation, which means that you could invest heavily in research and development in the beneficiation processes. One of the minerals that we have, which is actually, we have the largest reserves of it in the world, is calcium fluoride. Now, calcium fluoride is a starting material for all fluorochemicals. And people may wonder, what are fluorochemicals? Well, fluorochemicals are used in just about everything today. You know, the most common one you see it is in fluoride in toothpaste, for example, or you see it in the kind of anti-scratch pans,
Surfaces.
or you find Scotchgard, your fabrics, materials. People kind of think about fluorine, they think about that. But it goes in just about everything, electronics,
Right, from
TVs,
computer
fridges,
to,
yeah. So it's extremely high value. The problem is this fluorochemical market probably is valued in the tens to the hundreds of billions of dollars. But South Africa only beneficiates, I think, a fraction of a percent of the calcium fluoride. So we are losing out on a very large scale in terms of revenue that the country could generate. And so about 7 or 8 years ago, the Deputy President's office in the country instituted something called the Fluorochemical Expansion Initiative. And I was appointed as one of the 2 chairs in the country to drive this initiative and to develop it into a large industry in the country.
And you see the future of South Africa to an extent dependent on exploring its minerals.
Yeah, not just mining it, but actually refining it and
adding
beneficiating the full way. Yeah.
And for that, science and technology as a base is extremely important for South Africa.
That is, there's no doubt about that. I am absolutely convinced, and I have to say, it comes out very strongly in the National Development Plan of South Africa as well, that science and technology is key to unlocking the true potential of South Africa. So I'm very lucky to be in this kind of space at the moment in the country.
You are one of the youngest scientists whose contribution has been recognized both internationally and at national level. Would you like to sign off by giving a message to the younger generation of scientists?
Yeah. You know, I think today in the world, we face many challenges. It's not just whether it's in South Africa or in India or in Europe. We kind of see high unemployment rates. We kind of see poverty. We see inequality. And the economic growth rates of some of the developing countries are not as large as they should be. There's always this question about what do you do as a profession, or what discipline do you kind of go into? I'm convinced that going into science and technology is one way of truly addressing the kind of socioeconomic challenges which we face globally at the moment. Science and technology unlocks economic growth. Science and technology creates employment. Science and technology reduces inequality. So, you know, there's a famous saying by a US president, it's not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. I think it's the same thing for scientists and potential scientists. It's what can you do for this world?
What can you do for the country is the message that you take back home. That is the question which younger generation has to ask repeatedly. Thanks for watching Eureka. May I, on your behalf, promise our viewers that you will be happy to answer any questions if they have?
Sure, no problem. Yeah.
Write to us if you have any question. We'll pass on the question to Professor Dinesh. Thanks for watching Eureka. We'll come back next week with another as fascinating a scientist as Dr. Dinesh, Professor Dinesh is. Write to us if you have any questions. Our email address is eurekarstv@gmail.com. We'll come back next week with another outstanding scientist. Till then, goodbye.